As the time?
It's 2 minutes past.
Oh, God, bless you. All right, whenever you're ready, Scott.
You're all set now.
All right.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, I'm John Alden. Welcome to the December 15th, 2022 DRB meeting in the city of Essex Junction. Got a pretty interesting agenda tonight, but we will jump right in. With any additions or amendments to the agenda tonight.
None for me.
Item 2 is public to be heard. This is anyone in the audience who is here to speak about an issue that's not on the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board? Nobody. Okay, we're diving right in. Number 3 is the meeting minutes of November 17th you all had in your packets. I will entertain a motion to approve them.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I'll second it.
All right, motion is made to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? I looked at them, I thought they were fine. Anybody else have comments or additions on the minutes? All in favor of the minutes as issued?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so that takes us right to one of our main events of the evening is the public hearing appeal of administrative officer's decision to deny a home occupation permit for the cultivation of cannabis at 5 Shawn's Way in the R1 district by Adam Lanza, owner of Passion Fruit Farms LLC. They're appellate? What are they? They're not applicants anymore at this point, are they?
Appellant.
Appellants. Good.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lanza, who's also here with me. The best we just
Feel free to sit up there. Yeah.
Anywhere you want. Come on right up.
Mike, you want to do it, Scott?
Who's Adrian?
Yeah.
My apologies. Bye. Hope you never have. Good. So, Adrian, would you like to? What? Oh,
This piece of paper with the script on it, with the oath.
I have to read the oath. Did I miss a whole step at the beginning about the hybrid meeting? Anyone want to get me out of hot water on that?
I will read the hybrid meeting script.
Okay.
This is a little bit lengthy. The meeting of the Essex Junction DRB is in order. This is a hybrid meeting held both at 2 Lincoln and on Zoom. Because there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation, it's important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment if you are at the physical location. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us either using the chat feature on Zoom or by emailing rmahoney@essexjunction.org. And in the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary. I think that is unlikely. So I think we're good on that one.
All right. So I'm going to read the following oath to people, and for all people who are interested in speaking on this issue tonight, or we'll do anybody speaking on any issue tonight. Can I do them all at once?
Yep.
Okay. I hereby swear that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God, under the pains and penalties of perjury.
I did.
All right, good. Thank you. All right. We've got quite a bit of material on this subject already. My understanding is it generally comes down to what home occupation means and whether or not you can have a home occupation of a non-permitted use in a given zoning district. So why don't you give us a little story on your end? It doesn't have to be lengthy because we've all read it, but tell us what you're thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And when you say you've all read it, you read the letter I submitted today. Great. Sorry, that was submitted so close to the meeting. but
Yeah, that wasn't
appreciate-
my favorite, but we have it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Would it be most helpful for the board just have a little overview of what the project is first, or would you like me to jump into the?
I don't know. I mean, I got the sense. So I did a couple of things, and I went. I mean, I know the neighborhood reasonably well. I have to say that walking up and down Maple Street for the past 25 years, I've barely noticed Shawn's Way. So the fact that you're on a, the last house in at the end of a dead end that nobody really knows is there, I'm not sure it's relevant to me what you're doing there, because you're not supposed to have any physical evidence that you're doing anything there to be a home occupation. So let's just say that something is happening in a home that could be anything. Nobody's supposed to know. And yet at the end of the day, it's got to be granted a permit by the city in this form, and we have a chart that says some things are okay and some things aren't. And so I'm trying to keep this completely away from whether it's cannabis or not cannabis, because I think that gets us all into trouble. So given that, go ahead.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I would say, in the event that we determine that this is a home occupation and Mr. Lanza can apply for home occupation, not restricted by the use table, I think we would want to give the board evidence about how his project meets all the criteria within that home occupation section of the city's code.
Well, I'm going to grant that you probably can easily, because the application that we got indicates a long checklist of things that you can or can't do, and they all appear to be relatively easy to satisfy, amount of vehicles and trucks and deliveries and so on. So if we have questions about that, we'll ask you, but I'm still, for me anyway, the crux of it is the legal matter of whether or not a non-permitted use can be granted a permit because it's a home occupation.
Okay.
Is that fair? Anybody else is welcome to chime in, but I'm just trying to figure out what we're listening on testimony. I don't need to really go through a lot of stuff that probably isn't relevant, given that there's been so much presented already. If other members are looking for more information, chime in. If and when we get to the public portion of this, we need to get more evidence, chime in. But I think it's for me, it's a fairly easy legal matter, but I don't know if it goes this way or that way yet.
So, to be clear, I am the acting zoning administrator on this home occupation. So the staff person that you have for the Development Review Board here tonight is Wendy, who's participating on Zoom. So I think in terms of process and procedure, these folks want to present their case first. That's great. And then I think it would behoove us to have Wendy present the city side of things. I am here to answer questions as the zoning administrator who denied the home occupation, if you have questions for me.
Yes, and I'll just say that the denial was a fairly narrow statement. It didn't get into whether they complied with any of the other stuff. It got into whether or not it's legal to have a cannabis business in or a non-permitted use granted some license to exist, no matter how, in a zoning district that doesn't allow it. The the actual use, not the home occupation. Home occupation is allowed in R1 districts. Cannabis cultivation is not allowed in R1 districts. So if you're saying it's the permitted use or not, it's not permitted. If you're saying it's a home occupation, it appears to be permitted unless something trumps the other. So I'll wait to get, why don't you present your case, then we'll have Wendy rebut, and then somehow we'll decide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't mean to keep the board on its edge of its seat, because I do want to, I agree.
Yeah, but
You've
the,
identified the main issue.
yeah,
The concern I have is if once the board decides and one part, whether it's the town or Mr. Lanza decides to appeal this and it goes to the environmental court, the town, or sorry, you're not a town anymore, you're a city. If you, the city's adopted on the record appeals to the environmental court. Yeah. So the record we're creating here is what the court will make its decision upon. And I just want to make sure we're giving it as much evidence as possible to do that, so we don't have to come back here if the court decides differently than you do. But I'll get into the argument. So as the board identified, the zoning administrator's decision was based on the use table in section 620 of the city's land development code. That use table says what are permitted uses and what are conditional uses in the various districts. And I agree, there in the R1 district where Mr. Lanza's house is, cannabis cultivation is not a permitted use. That doesn't necessarily mean that cannabis cultivation is not required or is not permitted whatsoever in that district, but he can apply if he wants to use his property solely for cannabis cultivation, as defined under the zoning ordinance, as a permitted use in that district. And I think we're all in agreement on that. However, the zoning code and state statute are very clear that no bylaws in the code may restrict a homeowner's right to have a home occupation so long as it meets the home occupation criteria. And I guess we had a little discussion earlier about what those criteria might be. But the issue here for the board, I guess, initially is you asked, does something trump the permitted use use table of the zoning ordinance? And the answer is yes. The zoning ordinance itself does, and that's section 711, which says, nothing in this code shall infringe upon the right of any resident to use a minor portion of a dwelling for an occupation which is customary in residential areas and which does not change the character thereof. And this provision more or less copies Vermont state law in Title 24, Chapter 17, which governs zoning in the city. Section 4412, subsection 4, requires the same thing. And the only difference in that section is that the home occupation shall not have an undue adverse effect upon the character of the residential area in which the dwelling is located. As the chairman pointed out, this house is on a dead-end road, and we'd be happy to provide the board with ample evidence that there will be no impacts of this use outside of the house that are noticeable at all. It's an incredibly small and imperceptible occupation and use within this neighborhood, and will not change the residential character of the neighborhood. And in terms of interpreting that, I think the plain language of the city's zoning ordinance is clear. I think state law is clear. And when you have clear, plain language, you don't need to get into the intent of the ordinance. But even if you did, in this case, we're talking about Mr. Lanza's property rights to have a minor home occupation in his own home. And in that case, the Vermont Supreme Court has said that, well, let me back up. The starting point for all this is that zoning regulations restrict private property rights. And because of that, they must be construed in favor. If there's any ambiguity in the board's interpretation of a bylaw, it must be construed in favor of the landowner. That is especially the case, as the Vermont Supreme Court has said, when this home occupation permit statute is involved, because there's a specific state law that goes above and explicitly calls out home occupations as worthy of protection, and that no city bylaw may infringe upon that right. And so in interpreting that statute, the Vermont Environmental Court has also clarified and answered the board's question, stating that home occupations enjoy a special and distinct designation and allow for the use of residential property that would not otherwise be allowed absent the use's connection to an applicant's home. Thus, the authority to conduct and continue a use that would not otherwise be allowed in a certain zoning district is conditioned upon the operators of the business also occupying the property as the primary residence. Those sentences essentially repeat each other themselves, but generally the environmental court judges are better writers than I am. The point there is that the state statute, I think, is already clear enough, and that should end the question. But to the extent the board has a question about what the statute means, the environmental court has already answered it. That the protection for a homeowner's ability to have a home occupation in their house means you can have a home occupation in your residence that is not otherwise permitted in that district. And I think there's, I don't know for sure. I'm sure whether the zoning administrator or someone in the town might know the answer to this, but there seems to be a number of uses in the use table that could be home occupations that are not allowed in the R1 district. For example, one of the uses is professional services. You can imagine someone has, it might be a psychiatrist or some sort of professional who has a solo practice and runs that out of their home. That's a very customary home occupation. It's not a use that's allowed in the R1 district, but I don't think that would be a basis to deny that home occupation. Just conclude with my last note. I think in the staff report for the board, it identified the changes made to the city's land development code in response to licensing of cannabis establishments. And it noted that what's called Tier 1 manufacturing is allowed as a home occupation by definition, and cultivation is not. Under the city's land development code definitions, cultivation is a broad category. It covers all ranges of cultivation, from small home occupation, indoor, and basically tucked away operations such as Mr. Lanza's, all the way up to a large outdoor cultivation that might be more commonly seen in an agricultural area. That's not the case with manufacturing. Manufacturing has 3 different tiers in the Essex code. It has 3 different tiers in the state Cannabis Control Board regulations. In fact, as far as I could tell, the Essex code essentially copies and adopts the state's definition for these 3 different tiers. Tier 1 cannabis manufacturing is required by the state to be a home occupation. It's the smallest tier of manufacturing, and state rules require it to be a home occupation, and therefore the Essex code requires it to be a home occupation. Tier 2 and 3 manufacturing are larger uses. This isn't any evidence of the city's intent to determine that manufacturing should be a home occupation and cultivation is not. It's simply a ministerial copy pasting of what the state's rules are, which I imagine was a fairly wise move for administrative efficiency. it also leads to the point that if the city did not allow tier 1 manufacturing as a home occupation, it would essentially be prohibiting tier 1 manufacturing from the entire city, because that's the only way you can do tier 1 manufacturing. And doing that would be in violation of the state statute, which prohibits any municipality from wholly banning cannabis establishments. So in summary, to answer the board's question, can there be a home occupation for use that's not permitted within a district? The answer is clearly yes. That answer is yes, based on the city's own bylaws, based on state statute that the city is required to follow in its bylaws, and it's based on the court's interpretation of this question already. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Do we ask questions now? Can we ask questions now? Or wait till we get both sides?
I would recommend that you go to Wendy.
I just wanted, I've said plenty. I wanted to see if the rest of the board wanted to start in, but Wendy, how are you?
You are muted.
Sorry about that. I'm good. How much of the report are you interested in hearing? You were provided the report. I can read through it, or the staff comments.
I'm not sure what you mean by the report.
The staff report.
Staff.
The staff report,
Yeah,
yes.
we've all read the staff report. If anybody in the, if anybody else wants to see it or is unfamiliar with it, we'll probably get questions. So, again, for me, the key question is, we've heard testimony on whether you can have a non-permitted use be a home occupation in the district that it's not permitted to be in. So that's really the crux, I think. So if you can shed some light on that and then continue to inform us on what we need to know, that would be great.
In the report, we could say that everything was filed in a timely manner, and the land development code does indicate that we do not allow tier 1 cultivation for cannabis in the R1 district. And that is why the home occupation was denied. And I think our own attorney has been supportive of our decision according to the home occupation, and that we as a city have every right to determine what is allowed in a residential area to move that would.
I guess I'm going to go back to something that the appellant asked and is relevant to me, which is if it wasn't cannabis, because I think it's pretty clear what the city council was trying to do when they wrote the cannabis requirements and said what district it should be in or shouldn't be in. And so we got that, right? And that's really the guidance that we're trying to follow is what did the city intend and is that supported by the documentation that's available in state statute and city statute? And I'm kind of not sure at the moment. I'm thinking that let's just take the example of the professional services. If I don't allow professional services in a certain district, but if I say it's a home occupation, I can still do it, then for me, that test is pretty important because I would apply the same test to cannabis or any other activity that was suggested. So I know the state said you can't treat cannabis any differently, and that's fine. Nobody's trying to do that. We regulate most uses in the city by a picking or either allowing or excluding them from happening in a given district, and that's fine. That's how we do it. So I'm struggling to see why the city's saying you can't do it and the appellant is saying, well, yes, you can. And the difference is that it's a home occupation. And if we meet all the requirements for a home occupation, then we can do it, right? So I'm hearing two things and I'm struggling to figure out, I'm not a judge by trade, but I'm pretty logical. And so if somebody can present why one side can be true and the other can't, that would be really helpful. Because right now I'm saying to myself that home occupation is permitted in an R1 district. And so you can't say that a home occupation of activity X is okay, but activity Y is not okay. We can't say that. So how do we reach our conclusion here?
I think one of the differences with this particular home occupation is it can impact the residential neighborhood through the smell or light of the actual cultivation, and that's where that was the concern behind having cultivation in a residential area.
But that's I don't see legally, I mean, and again, I'm not a lawyer either, but I don't see legally how you can make those distinctions if you're without modifying the home occupation rules. Right, because and this is maybe a good time to go to the definitions of a home occupation that were alluded to before. But there's a list of 10 items here. Maybe there's actually 14 items that are required to be met in order to be a home occupation, and they basically say, and I'm paraphrasing, you won't know we're here, you can't see us, it doesn't affect the character of the neighborhood, you wouldn't know from looking at the building from the outside that anything was happening that wasn't within the character of a normal neighborhood. And I'm having a really hard time imagining that wouldn't be true. So if maybe I'll go back to the appellants on the 14 points here and let's just put those on the record, because I didn't even know the street was there, right? So now when I went to the street and I went down to see where this house is, there's nobody gonna be there that shouldn't be there because they intended to be there. So let's go through the 14 points. I think that's a good time for us to do that. And then we can keep asking questions, but in the back of my mind, I'm asking the question, if I don't know it's there and I'm not changing the character of the neighborhood and the definition of what I'm doing by its own meeting these definitions says you won't know I'm here, how can we argue that it's changing the character of the neighborhood? So let's go through the points.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just, note I understand the city's concerns that motivated these changes, with respect to smell and light. Those are criteria that we need to meet. And so we are going to show the board why there are not issues with smell and light. But I'll be happy to go through the review criteria with Mr. Lanza's help. And the board's talking about section 711 when you're talking about the 14 points. Is that right?
I'm looking at the home application, occupation application, and I'm looking at the land development code requirements, and they're 1 through 14, and they come from a specific location. You can tell me, but I'm reading right off your application.
I think we're looking at the same thing, but let me make sure I'm just looking at the same document as you. Okay. All right.
And I would just offer that section 711 starts with home occupations before you get to the 14 criteria and describes for an occupation which is customary in residential areas. And I think that's a critical component for the board to consider.
So Mr. Lanza, if you would help oblige. So the first criteria is that the use shall be conducted entirely within the dwelling by residents of the dwelling, and no outside employees may be hired. And you could just break that down. Will the use be conducted entirely within the dwelling? what does the use look like? Or what is it contained within?
So in the garage, there is a built-out section of 2 rooms that are sealed grow rooms that I can go through the construction, but basically don't allow any air to go in or out from the outside. And there's a nursery room inside the basement area of our house, and the same construction is not sealed on the inside, no exchange air in and out. There's lock key doors for each of the 3 rooms, part of the state cannabis control board, and they have online, all the time online security cameras that notify us of
Okay.
any activity.
Is there any aspects of the use that will be outside of the dwelling?
There is a air conditioner mini split, and so the condenser unit of that sits outside in the back.
Is that something that's customary as a residential?
I think so, because our neighbor has one, and I think it's even bigger. It's a common thing for the residents in the neighborhoods to have air conditioners.
Okay. And the second part of that criteria, will the use be conducted entirely by residents of the dwelling with no outside employees?
Yeah, no employees.
Okay. The next criteria, number 2, is that no more than 20% of the total area of the dwelling, including areas used for storage or equipment, may be used by the home occupation.
So I think we calculated it out to it's 18.7%.
Okay. And I think I remember in the staff report, it was something around 15%, but you remeasured it more accurately recently.
We measured today just to make sure.
Okay.
It looks like we've increased it by 86 square feet from the original estimate.
Okay.
So we're still under the 20% use.
Okay. Just wanted the board to be aware that this is the staff report correctly said 15%. We just wanted to update it. It's now 18%. Okay. Item number 3 is merchandise offered for sale shall be samples only. Orders may be taken for delivery off the premises. Will there be any merchandise offered for sale on the premises?
No.
Where is the merchandise sold?
Merchandise can only be sold to other licensed either retailers or wholesalers, other Vermont state cannabis licensee holders.
Number 4, delivery of any product to the home for business purposes shall not occur more frequently than once a day by trucks or vehicles ordinarily utilized for residential deliveries. How frequently will there be deliveries of any product for this use?
So I think soil is the only appreciable delivery, and it happens twice a year, every 6 months or so.
Okay, and what kind of soil is that?
So that's living organic soil that we get from Colorado, and it allows us to not use very many fertilizers or chemicals or things like that. It's for fully organic.
And how big is that delivery when that happens?
That's like 2 yards of soil, so it will come on a box truck, and I think probably the size of a big UPS delivery. If you ordered or something like that, it's about the size.
Okay, great. Criteria number 5 is that there's no toxic, explosive, flammable, combustible, corrosive, etiologic, radioactive, or other restricted material shall be stored on site. Any hazardous materials stored on site?
Not at all.
Okay.
Correct to say.
Do you know what the word etiologic
I
means?
don't even know what that is. I saw that.
Number 6, no mechanical equipment other than normally utilized within a dwelling for household or hobby purposes shall be allowed. What kind of mechanical equipment is contemplated by the use?
So we have lights, we have an air conditioner, we have a dehumidifier, and we have fans.
Okay.
And that's-
And are the lights, those are within the sealed?
yes,
Okay, would you ever see the lights outside of the sealed?
absolutely not. So,
Yes.
and I will say that if light pollution were to come in at the wrong time, in their dark time, it ruins the process. So it's an indoor operation by default. In order for it to be successful, it has to be a sealed light.
And the air conditioners you talked about, those are the mini splits?
Yes.
Okay, dehumidifiers are just inside?
Contained inside.
Okay.
With no exhaust out.
Okay. Criteria number 7 is No activity shall be conducted which would interfere with radio or television reception, nor shall there be any offensive noise, smoke, dust, or heat noticeable at the property line. Just break that into two. Is there any activity that would interfere with radio or television reception? Okay. Would there be any noise, smoke, dust, or heat noticeable at the property line? Would there be any noise, smoke, dust, or heat noticeable outside your garage door? Number 8 is no home occupation shall require external alteration of the residence or show other evidence of the conduct of such home occupation. Will there be any evidence of the home occupation outside of the residence?
Only the air conditioner, condenser.
And where's that located on the house?
That is behind the garage.
Okay.
In the back.
In the backyard. Okay. Number 9 deals with traffic. The home occupation shall not cause or encourage vehicular traffic not ordinarily associated with the residential area in which the home occupation is conducted, except as specified below. I'm going to skip reading these 2 paragraphs and paraphrase them in the interest of time. They deal with public access to the home occupation and occasional parties, meetings, or classes associated with home occupation. Is there going to be any public access to this home occupation? Okay. Will there ever be any parties, meetings, or classes associated? If you ever had any business meetings, where would you have those?
Phone.
And otherwise, would this occupation cause or encourage any vehicular traffic? Well, how often would you deliver your product?
If we're successful, I think 4 times a year would be what we would shoot for. So
Okay.
every few months we would make a single delivery. I think it would fit in the back of my car. 2 totes, or a Home Depot tote, that would be the volume.
Criteria number 10 is that deals with advertising for home occupation. Will there be any on-premise advertising?
It's not in our interest.
Criteria number 11 asks if the home occupation includes classes or instructions and deals with the number of students. You said there won't be any classes or instructions. Number 12, home occupations shall be open only between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. Is this ever open to the public?
Never open to the public.
13, the parking or storage of commercial vehicles shall not exceed 1 commercial automobile, pickup, or van. Will there be any commercial vehicles associated with this? Okay.
Other than the soil delivery.
Okay. But those aren't your commercial.
No,
Someone. And criteria number 14 requires that state of Vermont permits shall be obtained prior to operation of the home occupation, if applicable. Will you obtain all required state of Vermont permits prior to operating? Then, as zoning administrator pointed out, the home occupation bylaw refers to occupations that are customary in residential areas. I just want to ask you a few questions about that. How long have you lived in Vermont?
48 years.
Okay. Do you know anyone who has home occupation?
I've met several folks. One of my best friends is a mechanic, and he ran his shop in his house for quite a while. My partner has a glass making business in her house. I've known painters and carpenters and woodworkers that work out of their house.
Okay. When you say work out of their house, do any of them work out of their garage?
They're primarily garage items.
Okay. How would a mechanic use their garage?
So they have a car brought over, and the person leaves their car, and they put it up on their lift in their garage and open the door and bring parts in and out and work on them. Deliveries would come of parts, and car would leave, they get parked in the yard, another car would come, that kind of thing.
Are there impacts you're aware of that would,
I would say in that case, there are impacts in that there's multiple cars there, and there's sound, and there's probably some pollution of hazardous waste potentially going into the concrete and things like that. That is certainly a heavier use.
you mentioned painter, how do painter use their garage?
So the painters would go ahead and spray paint the car parts or what I'm familiar with, and then there's leftover paint. I think it's some disposal, question of how that gets disposed, whether it's in a drain or whether it leaks on the floor or what. So again, I see that as
All right, can we bring this back to the
Sure.
issue at hand, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few more questions on this. Do you know anyone who grows plants as a home occupation?
So I've gone to the Essex Farmers Market several times, and I know there's quite a few folks there that grow those vegetables on their property and are quite proud of it.
Could you use the proposed cannabis cultivation operation that you've designed? Could you use that to grow plants that aren't cannabis?
Absolutely.
What kind of plants?
Could be anything from roses to orchids to mushrooms to lettuce to flowers.
Culinary mushrooms?
All right, can I ask a few questions,
Sure.
please? So from the street, let's say you happen to walk down the street, how do I know that you have a home occupation?
One reason would be that the state CCB recommends, not required, they recommend that I would print the permit and put it on the outside of the garage window. So that if someone were to come and suspect something, they would be able to see that.
And so there's really no other outward indication whatsoever that you're doing anything other than living there. Yeah. We've heard there's no smell, there's no odor, there's no light, there's no meetings, there's less than, I have more than that going on at my house. I don't even have a home occupation.
We're a little antisocial.
So, yeah, I'm getting that. So back to Wendy, I'm really struggling to figure out why this is detrimental or even that the community character would be harmed or that anyone would even know they're there. And why should we, how can we make a rule that says you can't do this? If by definition you can do this.
When we created this particular code, it was looking at what has happened nationally with cannabis cultivation, and smell has been something that has been a significant concern with towns, and there are filtration is something that is required in a lot of places to reduce the smell. There's olfactory meters at this point to try to determine if there's smell and the filtration systems need to be kicked on. So that is a significant concern.
Is there any evidence to suggest that we have that somewhere? I mean, how we can be concerned about it, but how do we say, well, that break? I mean, I'm much more concerned about the case where it's a car, person working on cars in their garage, because then you do have noise and you have smell and you have visual and you have, we're kind of aware of that type of issue. I mean, short of somebody being able to actually walk by the house and smell it, I don't get it. It's not hitting my radar of problems yet. Like as far as I would know, this doesn't exist. The guy is underground. He doesn't want you to know he's there.
Well, I was going to offer that from a security perspective, I don't want there to be smell outside the building.
Yeah.
So that would,
And so interestingly, the mini split doesn't exchange air. It exchanges something in a pipe, either hot or cold, and then whatever happens to make, you've got a fan blowing things around, but nothing goes back and forth between inside and outside except piped water. So I don't look at that as an opportunity. If you have a fan in the window and you're blowing, outdoors with indoor air, and now maybe there's an issue. But
We would never want bugs to be able to go in and out. So that's the,
seal. So you said it's a sealed room.
Yeah. If I may, I think there's one point that we forgot to discuss. Would you just explain to the board the carbon filters that you do have and where the air is exchanged to other rooms?
so on occasion, I do want to purge the air in the room. So we have it's about this tall. It's like 6 inches wide, or excuse me, it's a 6-inch tube that would go up, and it scrubs the air in the room and would put it back into the garage if I felt like it was necessary to vent the room. But that's the extent of the venting
And there's carbon filters in that machine.
inside the room itself
Okay.
to scrub. So any air that got removed would go through the carbon filters and would be
Okay.
not smelly.
And that could be a condition of the permit that any air was filtered through carbon filters.
It's just a part of the way the grow is set up. It's part of the culture. I don't know how to explain it, but
All right. Does anyone else on the board have a?
Kristen has a question.
Can I answer a question? Hi, thank you. I don't know if this is, I was just curious about the other neighbors on the street and if they have the right to know that there's something like this going on, or if they are aware of it already. I just didn't know if that was part of the process, that the neighbors are informed of this or on that street.
I don't know.
The neighbors are notified of this appeal application, and so they are aware now.
Okay. Thank you. And can I just ask another question? Is as far as enforcement, I think the applicant mentioned that the percentage of his home that would be used for this, he reassessed it and the percentage went up. Like, how does that get enforced, after the fact? If something changes, is there a visit to the house from the city, or how does that work?
I wouldn't, I don't know. We're not struggling with enforcement, I think, a little bit in the city, and we'll probably be addressing that at some point in the future. But my guess is that you would start getting complaints from people that said, hey, there used to be one truck, every 4 months or 3 months, and now there's 10, a week. So something must be going on there, and that would probably prompt a visit from one or more enforcement people, of whoever those people are. But short of that, I'm having trouble imagining a less impactful to the surrounding area business. Like there's more UPS trucks delivering random stuff from Amazon in my neighborhood than sounds like you're gonna get, or the guy who got his topsoil, to go, regrade his yard probably gets more dirt. So anyway, I'm just trying to figure out why we're so concerned, and I'm trying to figure out how it's not related to cannabis. And so, so far, it comes down to, again, if it's any activity that's you can be reasonably doing already in your, cultivating. We're just saying we're cultivating plants. We don't care what kind they are. We're cultivating plants. And if that's routine in a neighborhood, then it ought to be routine here. And I'm waiting to find out why it's not. So we'll keep going, and I'll get more board comments.
So I can, in making my initial decision, I can explain some of that.
Okay.
So to be clear, the state has laid out a process for municipalities to use zoning to regulate cannabis. And they have made it clear in their guidance that this is a situation where the city could not prohibit all of the cannabis establishments from the city as a whole, but the city has the right to use zoning. A very real and useful way zoning is used is by defining what districts a use can occur within. The city has allowed each of the cannabis establishments as defined in state statute in districts throughout the city. The intent of the council in making the land development code changes was very clear that cultivation can only occur in the planned agricultural district. The home occupations are certainly offered a level of, I'm going to use protections, but that's not the right word, a level of authority within zoning. The very clear issue is that cannabis is not customary in residential areas. It's not customary because it is a brand new use. 2, it's a controlled substance. And for that reason, I don't feel that it meets the definition of home occupation and rises to the level where it could be approved in that way. I'll stop there.
Okay. Other board comments? So can I open it up to the public now? Is there anyone in the audience that would care to speak to this topic?
Well, I would just like to propose, I'm just wondering.
Name and yeah.
I'm sorry, my name is Elise.
Want to step me up to the mic, please?
My name is Elise Martin. I'm Adrian's partner. I just want to say, just side comment, you can have dinner over at our house and sit in the kitchen at our table, and you would not know we have this home occupation happening. Just want to say that. Second of all, I think if it mattered what your feelings were, Regina, then that would be not a home occupation issue. We're here about the home occupation application and the requirements that are asked of us. We have met all of them, and there's nothing on there that says anything about controlled substances being excluded from the home occupation permit at all. So again, we are applying for home occupation. We have met all of the criteria. Nobody walks down our street because it's a dead-end street, so no, there's no reason to. It's completely surrounded by hedges and wood, so you can't see anything at all. Again, sealed rooms, so you can't smell anything. And not that we've hid anything from our neighbors, but our children play together, and they are very happy. And I'm sure that our neighbors would be happy to come and speak on our behalf and show that we are orderly, nice, committed, and engaged with the community on a level that you probably wouldn't expect from most stoners, as you're probably thinking we are. So that's just my piece.
Can I ask you a couple other questions? I
Certainly,
got started. So the glass business. I know some glass artists, and that there's heat, there's smell, there's flame, there's
No,
no, not
I
on
use
yours?
a glass cutter and I solder, and that's it. So,
so more of a stained glass thing.
yes, that's exactly what I do. I make stained glass pieces and window art.
No, I was just saying, as home occupations go, there are some other home occupations that probably are more offensive in their outward manifestations that get less
I think my
hassle
glass
because,
making is
right?
more offensive than
Yeah.
the cultivation, actually, because of the glass dust that you can breathe in. I have to wear a mask. We don't have to wear a mask when we're cultivating. It's
Yeah.
literally taking care of plants, harvesting them, and that's it.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Okay. I reread the rules on taking testimony and making a decision. It says we have 45 days to figure this out. So that means we don't actually have to decide something tonight, but if we could, that's always good, right? Is that procedurally what happens?
Yes, you have 45 days. Once you close this hearing, you have 45 days to make a decision. The DRB in your deliberative sessions has the right to ask for legal counsel on this. I would always recommend this case or any other that it's customary if you're getting something the day of your hearing that you take some time and think
Well,
through
I
that.
will say the one thing that bothers me a little is essentially taking my legal advice from the applicant or appellant. You know, like I would really like to get the city's legal advice at the same time. So, you know, because we're now quasi judicial and we're basically listening to lawyers tell us what we can and can't decide on. And sometimes that defies common sense. You know, I try to follow my logic and common sense the best I can, but it doesn't always mean legally I know what I'm doing. So I think my suggestion would be to follow that suggestion and say, well, if we're all done talking about this, and I'll let everyone have one more pass, but if we're all done talking about this, I'd suggest that we conclude the public hearing and then postpone the deliberative session until later. And that could be after, you know, later tonight, or it could be later once we've had the city council take a look at all of this, because I still have the same question. You know, if you switch the actual use here, does it happen for some other use? Is it okay? We apply all the same tests, all the same rules, and if we can say, well, that's okay, then I need to know that.
Kristen's got a hand on.
Oh, sorry. I have one other question. Is this the first application that the city is seeing for cultivation of cannabis in the city? Since I've joined the committee.
I believe it is. We had somebody that came through the PC before all the rules went into place and was just trying to get a sense of where the direction was. And I think that was more of an outdoor growing. Like, we're growing our 4 plants that we can legally grow now, but if we want to grow more, you know, I keep looking at your screen. Anyway, you know, if I grow 5 plants or 100, what happens?
Okay.
But that was just coming to talk to us. That wasn't an actual case. Yeah.
There
Yep.
was a cultivation license that was approved prior to our land development code because the city wasn't created until July 1st. So there was another license that was the DRB, or we have had no.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy.
All right. Anyone else on the camera remotely that has a hand up or wants to say something? Any closing remarks, Wendy?
Just trying to uphold the intent of the LDC and keeping residential areas comfortable for all of the residents.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else on the board? Anyone else in the audience? The appellants, any final remarks?
Well, we've taken up plenty of the board's time. We really appreciate your attention to this. I guess I would ask, you know, the DRB has right to its own counsel, but if the city attorney is providing any sort of public opinion, to the board, I would like an opportunity just to respond to that. Otherwise, I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Motion to close the public hearing. Do we have to do that?
Seconded?
Second, all in favor of closing the public hearing? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed. Thank you very much. As I said, I think we'll do our deliberative session later within the 45 days, and we'll have an answer to you. Otherwise, it passes anyway. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Just read it tonight. Oh, yeah. Sounds good, right? All right, so back to our agenda. We are up to public hearing B. Conceptual site plan to remove an existing duplex and construct 18 residential units with parking at 161 Pearl Street in the HA district by 161 Cheeseman LLC owner. Are the applicants here? And I believe I see one or two. Come on up. Introduce yourselves, and you've already been sworn in, so you're free to begin a presentation.
Yeah, Brian Courier, Larry Burke Civil Associates.
Doug Cheeseman.
So I've read through all your material. I'm sure the rest of the board has. But why don't you tell us what you have for us and maybe walk us through the fine points? And I think parking is probably the big one, but other than that, tell us how you get 18 units on there.
Okay, so we're proposing, as you said, an 18-unit apartment building on the property at 161 Pearl Street. There's an existing duplex on the property, a non-conforming use. The property is approximately 0.32 acres. The applicant also owns the property at 159 Pearl Street, the property just to the east of the proposed development. We're proposing to reconstruct an existing parking space in front of the new apartment building with 5 parking spaces. We are in the highway arterial district, which does not have a density requirement. Essentially, it's how many units can you supply parking for, as you mentioned, John. So most of the building is it's an 18-unit apartment building. It's a 4-story building. The application does call it a 4.5-story building, but as the staff report goes through the definitions of a story and how height is measured, we do meet the 4-story requirement in the district, and we also meet the height requirement in the district. There's an entrance of the building in the front along Pearl Street. There's also an entrance to the building, what we call the half story, which is the basement of the building, along the rear. The parking lot for the adjoining commercial space to the south of the proposed building. I don't know if many of you, I'm sure longtime Essex residents know the building, but there is a 2-story component to the building in the back. So you can drop a story as you get to that rear parking lot behind the 59 Pearl Street property. So we do have municipal water and sewer utilities. Most of our landscaping is concentrated along the front parking space, and we do have a sidewalk connection in the rear. There is a wetland that was delineated associated with Sunderland Brook in the rear of the property. We did include an email from the district wetland ecologist saying that the proposal seemed that it would be approvable. We do need a wetlands permit from the state of Vermont, and we're aware of that. But as part of our conversation with the state, in order to impact a piece of the buffer, in order to construct our sidewalk to the rear entrance and proposed landscaping, we are proposing to eliminate a little impervious area on the adjacent property that's already in the buffer and replace it with more landscaping. So to get into the, you want me to get into parking?
You need so many parking spaces for the use and you don't have them, exactly on your parcel. So, I'm sure everybody's wondering how you're getting the parking. And, I will say that I am familiar with shared parking and so on. Maybe others aren't, so you might wanna
Yep,
just talk about that.
yep. So we provided a table in our application materials for the adjacent 159 Pearl Street project, or existing 159 property to the south. It's 100% commercial. We showed all the tenants, their uses, their required spaces. Based on the land development code, we're not asking for any waivers or any changes to the land development code for the parking requirements of the existing commercial building. Shows that the required parking for that facility is 54 spaces. There's a total of 81 spaces now. 5 spaces are being constructed as part of our building, so that's a total of 86. So we have 86 parking spaces proposed as in between the two parcels. 54 of them are associated with the commercial use. That leaves 32 spaces that are available for a shared parking agreement with the neighboring property. And under common ownership, we haven't supplied that shared parking agreement, but we recognize it's in the staff report and it will be a requirement in case something is sold. We're requesting 18 spaces for the apartment building. The land development code requires 2 spaces per unit, I believe, and then 1 for an additional 10. Significantly more than the 18 that we're requesting. The ratio we're going for is 1.25 spaces per unit. Of the 18 units, they're all 1-bedroom units, so expected to be limited parking for the units that are being proposed. So the waiver, the Planning Commission previously had granted or has a history of granting waivers within the village. The DRB, we don't have a history with yet, obviously, but one of the most applicable studies that our firm has done was back in 2012 was the most recent one done, and it was done at the 235, 241 Pearl Street property, about a mile towards the 15 Susie Wilson intersection. And that study was done on 4 days, late at night when you'd expect a residential building, which these are. It's actually a mix, these two properties, of 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms. So for a 1-bedroom use, you'd expect the parking to be even less than what was studied. But that study showed that the spaces per unit were about 1 space per unit were being utilized in this space. Now, I think 1 space a unit is definitely on the aggressive side for residential. So we're proposing 1.25 spaces per unit. And that's where we get to the 18 that are being proposed. And that's with the 5 that are already on. So we get up to 23. And that's the 1.25 spaces per unit. We also did a parking count on the 159 Pearl Street property. We did a parking count at 1 p.m. In March of this year during what we would consider a peak commercial time on the property, and it showed that there were 32 spaces being utilized, mostly in the front, but some in the rear. Very few, if any, along the side of the building. The battery that just doesn't show up on the screen. Along the old Harley Davidson dealership, I think it's Champlain Equipment now, maybe. But along the east side of the building, very little parking's being utilized, as most of the front entrances are front and rear are where the entrances are located. So we calculated 54 spaces to be required as part of that building. We counted 32 in what I would consider a peak time. So that's an extra 22 spaces that we're not asking for credit for, but we believe that there's plenty of parking to accommodate the uses that are within the structure, the 159 commercial building, the 18 residential one-bedroom units that are being proposed. And then there is a buffer there if Mr. Cheeseman has a tenant that would require more parking that would like to go into the 159 Pearl Street building.
All right. So, any board questions, or maybe I'll let the city engineer support staff
Sure.
go through this with us.
Sure.
And the board, if you have comments or questions along the way, just ask.
Okay. So, we did a review of this project. It actually came in, I think, initially to the city as a final application. So it's a fairly complete set of plans. And at that point, they were told that they needed to come in for sketch first. The process in the HA district is sketch, then move to final. So essentially what we have is a really complete set of plans for sketch, something
I
that's
was gonna say
a lot
that.
more than we would normally see.
Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah.
So that's why you see a pretty extensive staff report for a sketch plan review. But given that those plans came in to the office, as city engineer, we reviewed them. That's our chance to get it. I hate it when we don't make a comment for something and then we make that comment later. It just looks bad. So that's why there's so many comments here. But I think if we can get through them, we talk to the applicant, get through them, it should make smooth sailing for the next level if they get there. So I think that rather than go through every one of the staff reports that we complied with or they complied with, I think if we just hit the highlights of things that I think need to be addressed from a city standpoint,
Ideal, yeah.
I think that's the most efficient use of everybody's time. So I'm gonna just zip through the ones, and if I'll slow down, I'll go back if you guys want. But I'm just gonna hit the ones that were bolded. Most of them are very specific and easily resolved, I think. So the first one is parking in the setbacks. In the front parking area that they're creating, they show one space that is in the side yard setback that is not allowed by the land development code. And so I note that whether or not you guys choose to waive that, that's up to you guys, but I just bring it up to your attention that that's a piece of the code that's not met.
So it would be on the one on the south side.
Yeah, I think it's this last one right there where the cursor is.
Yeah.
Very minor.
Yeah, at about
So
split the space.
Some of these-
Not wholly, it's a
Correct.
30% of it or
Some of these-
40% of it or something.
Some of these comments are finicky. They're final comments at sketch, but that's what we do.
Yeah.
So there's one there. In terms of the parking waiver, they're asking for that waiver. We had made a comment that they should provide supporting data for a similar use. It sounds like they've done that tonight. And I'm aware of that in the past, that the Planning Commission for previous projects has done that. I just like to have the data in this application so you guys can make that informed decision.
So let me just chime in on that, because there is a whole manual on shared parking and you get to assign various uses and things. Did you double check with that, or is it?
We didn't even go to that level.
Yeah.
Even though it's mixed use and, usually residential and commercial work well together, if you look at it on an hour basis, we didn't even go to that.
Because you have actual
'Cause you don't need-
physical
We have
evidence
actual
and
count.
data
The
from,
Planning Commission had a lot of history with
Yeah.
those types of waivers. I
Yeah.
understand if the DRB wants to see something different, that's fine. But we're relying on previous decisions and, we didn't even go to that level. We didn't think it was,
yeah.
necessary.
Fortunately, there's just a little continuity between the planning commission and
Yes,
the
there is.
DRB.
That's,
Yeah. Okay, good.
One of the things-
But
well-
shared parking is, I think, because, the rules say you gotta have this much, and then when we talk about ways to not have that much, you have to know why. And so, thanks for clarifying.
We'll it's further down in the staff report, but I'll speak to it right now as we're there. Shared parking agreements, at least in my mind, need to have some sort of legal agreement that survives changes that might occur. You may decide to sell one of those parcels and the other person doesn't like that. And if it's not, a handshake agreement is great and it works until something bad happens. I would highly recommend that you guys require some form of a formal agreement that gets submitted that will stand that.
Yeah, we're okay with that.
I figured that you would. It's a comment that I think needs to be in the record. Okay, so when we talk about building height and stories of the building, we looked at this really, really hard because they're pushing the limit right to the limit, which is fine. But I note that on the site plan that we initially received, they showed grading around the perimeter of the building. The ground was at close to the ground level up by the first floor near the front of the building, and as you went back, the grade dropped to be down towards the lower level. No problem. But then a subsequent filing that we got from the applicant after that initial submission had an elevation view that then talked about a retaining wall that was to go around the front of the building and down halfway each side of the building. We checked that one as well. That one was okay too. The question that I have for them is, what are you doing? If you want the retaining wall, put it on the site plan so we can understand what needs to be constructed and what's approvable. If you don't, the grading as shown on the plan met those requirements. We just need to know which one it is.
Yeah, well, the proposed grading on the site plan is likely what we'll come back with.
And that's a discussion for final. You guys submit it. I'm just bringing it up as, hey, that's something that we
Well, it's
noticed.
nice to not have a retaining wall if you don't need it.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, so that's.
So can we get back to the story thing? So did you
course.
determine that it is acceptable in the LDC definition as 4-story building with a basement?
We did. It's very specific in that it depends on the amount of that basement floor that's exposed. If it's exposed more than 6 feet for more than 50% of the building, it counts. And in this case, it's not. We went around and we quadruple checked to make sure that it isn't.
No,
it's close, but it isn't.
Fascinating. I've been on the other side of that too a few times, and basically my interpretation was you get it to balance exactly, and then you throw a teaspoon of soil one direction or the other.
It goes the other way.
Yeah. So it's close, and you gotta check it. And if you guys have it checked, there is quite a grade difference there. So if you can pull this off, it's actually really nice for the building because then you do actually get two exits, and they don't have to be at the same grade. And in fact, it's sometimes better if they're not.
Okay. Let's see here. Next, we talked about this front parking area. At least the site plan that we saw didn't have any, unless I missed it, didn't have any grading shown for the front parking area. So I'm unable to understand the pattern of the drainage, where the water's going for that parking area. We're just going to want to see that in the future submittals.
Can we, just on the water management, that's usually a pretty big topic. How does the water management or stormwater detention or any of that stuff apply here? Does it apply? Is this parcel big enough? Is it, where are we with that?
In terms of state permits, it is less than a half an acre of impervious area, so it doesn't trigger a state permit. However, the city and the land development code, because we do have an MS4 permit, we're concerned with it and we like to look at it. And that leads right into the next comment is we'd like to see the drainage computations for this, even though it's so small. The city accounts for every little bit that they can as part of their MS4 permit. And so we ask for that data that the city can then use. We get to review it so we understand where water's going, and then they get to use it to their benefit.
And currently, who has to figure out the MS4 permit, and you have to renew it every so often? Is that something that the city's doing?
I think it's the water quality superintendent that takes care of that.
Okay.
So again, just drainage computations, provide them, you're familiar with them, and we'll take a quick look at them, but it's really a checklist item. So we talk about accessible provisions. They're providing striping a new accessible parking space in the back corner. And we just asked for some documentation that confirms that the grading in that area meets the ADA requirements. Within the accessible area, it needs to be 2% in all directions. It's kind of hard to tell from just those contours, so we just asked for a little confirmation there.
And the whole accessible route into the other building, and we're just gonna assume that accessible parking space is gonna be part of the agreement with, right, if it's for
I would think so.
Yeah.
It'd have to be.
And I don't necessarily see this as an issue myself, because I think there's areas in that parking lot you could do it even if this one doesn't. We just need to know that we're approving a space that's within the requirements.
Yep.
Speaking of accessible spaces, we would just love to know confirmation from the applicant that combined, these two facilities have the proper number of accessible spaces per the code, the land development code, based on the number of spaces total in the development.
Yeah, I think the requirement's 4, and that one will be 4.
We'll make it. So it's just more for you to say it, so we
Yep.
can say, yep.
just the observation. So, when we get done with this development, is there a way that we find out whether the existing building is pushed out of compliance because of anything that happened here that we're saying? I mean, is that, it's probably not really relevant because it's an existing building and whatever, right? But if we're saying we're gonna take some things or use some space that's part of that existing building now, and
There's two items that, to me, speak to that. One is the parking, and we're going to preserve that in that agreement. And the other we're going to speak about shortly is lighting. I think because we're touching that existing building, and using it specifically for residential, the city staff has recommended that we light at least the portion that's being used for the residential, so the back corner. Commercial, it's not such a big deal. Other than it is unfortunately dark here sometimes during business hours in the wintertime, but for the most part, the commercial during the day is okay. It's light out, but now that it's going to be used for folks coming home at night, some lighting in the back is recommended. Okay, we already talked about that parking space. So landscaping, as far as the staff is concerned and our technical review, they have landscaping proposed. In my mind, that's up to the DRB to review that and whether or not they feel it meets the screening requirements and the buffer requirements of the land development code. And we can take a look at those special sections if you want. But I think that's really for you guys to look at as opposed to me.
Most of our landscaping is concentrated along Pearl Street. Not a ton between the existing commercial buildings on either side. There's an existing hedge on the north side that we're trying to preserve, and then a lot more in the back. So that's where we chose to put the majority of the budget. If the board would rather see it somewhere else, let us know.
This is a little unique one actually, because normally we're taking an existing residential area and we're building a commercial building and we're trying to provide the buffer between the two, and just the opposite here. But
Yeah.
is there, just getting, or sticking with that is, I mean, you're right. Usually we're saying, oh, well, these commercial buildings are impacting the residential. Does it work the other way? Do we have a trigger that says that we need to provide screening for the residential because we're putting it next to a commercial?
I'd have to double check myself, but I think the way the land development code says is you need to provide this between those two uses. It doesn't say which one's first and which one's existing, which one's separate. It says you need that buffer between those two.
And the residential district is in the rear.
Yeah.
And where there's a wetland and Southern Brook in between. So the single family homes are in the rear. And multifamily housing is the only residential use allowed in the HA.
It's the house that moves in next to the airport shouldn't complain about the noise, so they shouldn't complain about the commercial activity. But that, I think, is what the intention of the land development code is. It's,
I'm just
with the landscaping.
thinking for the owners, if you're trying to provide a relatively nice experience for your residential tenants, that may help to put some more screening in there, but it's If we can't require it, then it's purely up to you. If we can require it, then we probably want to look at that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so we're trying to keep as much vegetation as existing on the sides. But if you'd rather see that cleared, we'd like to keep the hedge on the north, but in between both the buildings that Mr. Cheeseman owns, you know, if you'd rather see a hedge through there, you know, that's fine. You'll see, or if you look at the elevations in our site plan, which this showed it, but the little bump out on the northeast corner of the building,
Yep.
are decks. So
Nice.
they're not directly across from the commercial building, and then the other decks of the building are located on the front. So we purposefully didn't put any decks directly facing the adjacent commercial buildings. Now you have windows, but you know it's only one story, and we're 4 stories, so the vast majority of our units will be above the adjacent commercial uses.
One thing that I'll note is that you mentioned, it doesn't really show up very well on the plan, that there is vegetation in between those buildings right now. If you're trimming some of it back.
We'll try and keep as much as we can, but you know,
It doesn't really come
Yeah.
off, here, that there is-
Yeah, and when you start digging foundations, a lot of that's gonna
right.
It may be.
disappear. So.
Right. I think the hedge on the north is on the line, so that one will be able to be saved. But in between the two buildings, I can't imagine much would be saved through there. Anything big has got to go.
So the only point of getting to, and it's not so much a technical issue, it's more of the stuff that we all like to see with residential things is what happens outdoors for the tenants? You know, are there little barbecues? Is there a place for them to sit down? Is there, you know, something going on out there where there's actual outdoor space that is designed for the residents
Yep.
as a group or not? So
Yep.
you don't have to answer any of these questions now. It's just sketchy.
Yeah. No, and
Something
you
to
know,
think about.
something I thought of that coming. We don't have any amenities proposed where we are. The wetland buffer is close to our sidewalk is within the wetland buffer, so we don't really have space in the back.
Yeah.
But Pearl Street Park is a quarter mile to the north from here.
Yeah, and it's kind of a neat little park because most people don't even know it's there. But,
Absolutely.
so I would just say that, you know, from my perspective, because this is on, you know, a major transportation line and you got all those other things that make it special, connectivity is going to be a big thing. So I don't know if you've got trails out the back or something that's not necessarily obvious to, you know, what we're looking at here because you've kind of screened over the. But you know, if there are existing natural features that are being used for passive recreation by people and they're out there already, some ability to connect to them would be thoughtful. Remember that thoughtful growth thing? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Pedestrian access. Applicant mentioned they provided a sidewalk in the back from the existing parking lot of 159 to the rear entrance. I didn't see one from the front parking to the front steps. I didn't see a little sidewalk section there.
Yeah, I think it's an oversight. Yeah.
Probably, I'm just
Yeah.
bringing it up,
Yeah.
that we would want to see that. Similar to what John is talking about right now in terms of amenities for the folks there, bike racks. We didn't see any bike racks. The city would recommend a bike rack at the front and the rear in this case. I would imagine that depending on where you lived in the building, somebody would access the front door only and somebody might access the back door only. Okay, the one question that I can't quite wrap my head around this one is the circulation and the intended circulation of the front parking area. They closed one of the curb cuts. There's 2 curb cuts on 161 Pearl right now, and they're closing one of them, which I think is a good thing, and they're preserving the other. The one on the west.
Sorry, I'm seeing it, but I paused the share, so you're not seeing it.
Is the one on the west, it's narrowed up to what looks to be like 14 or 15 feet that accesses out on Pearl Street. And then they have an access easement for leaving, I'm not sure if it's leaving or coming, right there where the cursor is, to access the front parking lot that then gets you out to Pearl Street. The thing for me is this access on Pearl Street, the one that's existing, is an exit only right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes that an entrance only. And if that's the intended circulation, that's fine, and it's okay that way. Because it's 14 feet wide, that can be used as a one-way access. But if it's intended that access from 161 is two-way, it needs to be 24 feet. And if you're going to allow circulation this way, into that front parking area, well, they need to come in to this access point on 159, because that one's an exit only. So we would need that access easement to encompass that entrance, at that point. I don't know what your intention is. I just see that as I'm not really sure what's clear there. And so if we can get some information as to what you're thinking, and whether or not we need any signs or any striping that alerts the users to that intended circulation.
Well, most of the parking for the apartment is down behind or somewhere on that parcel anyway, so they will be using that entrance.
That
The
does
bulk
come,
of them will be.
That's coming to another, that speaks to further down that, that access easement is gonna need to encompass all the way to get you to Pearl Street. But that's something that I just wasn't, it's not clear from here is what's that intended circulation. Because the one access point on 161 that's remaining can't be two-way as shown right now because of its width. So we just need to.
So we'll likely widen that to 24 feet, so it can be two-way. And I was unaware that the existing access on the west side of the 150 Pearl property was exit only.
I believe that it is.
Yeah.
It's a pretty.
I think that's the way they use it. I don't think there's signs that indicate
Yeah,
that
I think
it
there
is.
is, because
Is there?
I seem to recall doing a Google
Okay.
thing and seeing the
Looking
one-
at the angled parking now, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That you
Yeah.
would come in that way just because of the reduced aisle and the angled parking.
That definitely is the flow. They
Yeah.
come in on that side and exit up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And if you're a tenant and you're coming in and you're hoping for one of those front spaces and you get all the way over there and you can't get there,
Right.
you got to go do a U-turn, come back around and go around the back.
Right.
yeah,
Or you have to be able to go the other way in the parking lot.
So we'll widen the existing curb cut.
yeah, it's,
And we're eliminating the other one. Net back.
yeah. I think it's a good thing. It's just it can't be two-way with the width that it is, and it doesn't need to be two-way. It's just we just need to understand it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about lighting. We need to have some, per the land development code, the land development code would say that we need some lighting in the back parking lot. And we're recommending lighting in the front parking lot as well, just because of the use. It's a residential use. We like to see that.
Yeah, so we have lighting underneath the canopy, but I think since the building is as close as it is to the parking lot, we may propose a building mounted light of some kind. Nothing major. I mean, there's a lot of light on Pearl Street, so.
Yeah.
And then I like what you said, Jeff, about, maybe adding a pole in the rear. There are two lights there now, but adding a pole where where we're closest to that building, likely
Yeah.
those will be the 18 shared spaces that we're asking for.
Yeah, and I don't, at least for me, my opinion, I don't see the need to light up the whole place.
Right.
But if the area that's focused of people in and out of their cars and
Yeah.
walking to the building, it becomes a safety issue at that point.
Yeah, we're fine with it.
So, so joint parking facilities, we talked about that, having the easement. And I just I had a question. You said you did the existing parking study that said that you needed 54 spaces. I just wanted some confirmation that the building's fully occupied.
It is.
In this time that we have now with COVID, there's a lot of empty office spaces. So if you did it and half the building's empty, that doesn't mean much.
Fair. It's fully occupied.
It's full.
So, okay. So there is a section of the land development code that talks about parking waivers, and there's certain criteria that you need to evaluate, the DRB needs to evaluate. That's in 703K16. I think you alluded to that before, John. So that'll be something that we can go into if you want those specific sections. Okay, lighting we talked about already. In the traffic circulation in the front we talked about. One of the things that the land development code says is that you need to have a curb cut that's 25 feet from a property line. And in order to have they've eliminated, there's two there now, they've eliminated the one that's furthest from the west property line, which would be too close to the other property line. The DRB needs to give an exception to that, to the code to allow that curb cut to stay. I think it should stay. I think it's a good design to remove the one that they did. It's a little bit of a code technicality that you just need to say it's okay.
I need to ask a quick question on curb cuts, because back in the PC days, the curb cuts were governed by the village trustees. And now that we're a city, I don't know if that relationship has changed or not. Curb cuts were something that were officially granted by what would be now the city council.
Let me just look at that one section, 705, because I think my recollection is it says that it's the DRB that it's going to do that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this particular regulation is an access management, right? Like, you don't want to be too close. I mean, that's right next to that other curb cut, which is unfortunate, but, so that's within your purview. I think you might be right. If somebody needed to get a new curb cut permit, that would likely go to the council.
So we can take one away, but if somebody wants a new one.
We'd be sure to extend,
Yeah.
when we widen it, we'll widen it obviously towards, the east.
Yeah, I support what you guys are doing. It's just that you go through the land development code, this can't be there. And so because you're making changes, it's okay now because it's there, but because you're making some changes, you have the opportunity to move it if the DRB so desired. And so, John, to answer your question, that one section says the commission this was meant the planning commission, may grant exceptions to the curb cut standards due to unique circumstances and superior design for
I think it
making a change.
says something about curb cuts somewhere else, and that's what we all got stuck with. But I just wanted to check in with Kristen. Are you doing okay up there on the screen, Kristen? You following all the stuff we're doing?
Yes, I am.
Just check.
Very minor here at this level, but dumpsters, water quality superintendent gets after me for dumpsters to make this comment that reminds you that dumpsters need to be covered and the drain plugs installed in those dumpsters. So we usually ask that you just put a note on the site plan. It's something that now it's memorialized in an approval that you acknowledge that requirement.
So you're not talking about like a roof, right? They just have to.
Yeah, the flip covered dumpsters, so stuff doesn't blow around
Yep.
and stuff like that.
Yep.
I believe that's. So we talked about having the DRB review the screening and the landscaping. Stormwater, we just asked for those drainage computations. The one thing that I did note in the planner review is you have a footing drain that is daylighting way down over the bank. And so you're tearing up that bank to go put a pipe in. I would love to see some erosion controls and some stabilization on that bank after you dig it up and you restore it so it stays, whether it's matting or whatever. There isn't any now shown as I recall.
Is there a different way to do that? Like you don't daylight it so far down the bank, you shorten it up, you put in some riprap, you do something else?
That's a great question because usually if we daylight them at the top, it tears the bank all the way to the bottom. So we put it at the bottom and it saves that. It just means that you have to disturb the slope. I don't necessarily disagree with what you're doing. I would just like to see those protections for that interim period of time between installation and revegetation.
And it's a footing drain, so if there's water and it's flowing a lot, you should go to the bottom. If
Yes.
it's not flowing much, you could probably go to the top. Something they may decide. If we show it at the bottom, and we get a wetland permit for it to go to the bottom, it's okay if it goes to the
Better to
bottom.
do it
No
that
one's going to care if we pull it up, but we don't have a problem with matting it after we're done.
And I believe almost done. In terms of the building itself, the visual impact of this building, I think that falls on the DRB to take a look at its architecture, its massing, its finishes, and whether or not you feel that meets the surrounding.
Let me ask you a
neighborhood.
question about that, and I think that's for Regina. The current version of the LDC doesn't have design control in this district, right?
Correct.
The proposed version of the LDC may have design control on this district. What's the schedule? And because they've submitted a conceptual plan, are they now in the queue for this project being reviewed under the current rules, or are they, if they wait too long to do this, will they possibly be subject to the next regulation?
Yeah, so conceptual review typically is not a vested approval. So as soon as they get in their final application, they would be vested in whatever code is the code of the day. The city council has the land development code amendments in front of them, but they have not yet warned the hearing for those proposed amendments. So those don't have any relevancy until that hearing is warned. I can't imagine they are going to warn that hearing in the next couple of months, but I can't give you a guaranteed time frame of that precisely.
And just something to, put on the record, it's that, we are conceptual, but we have submitted, a set of plans that you could build off of, a preliminary plan set would be.
It's all semantics at this point. You guys have to tell us at
I agree.
some point. And
We also submitted in September. Keep in mind. For what it's worth.
Not something we necessarily ever know. They show up when we
Understood.
get warned. So
Understood.
I just wanted to put the time frame out there because it may potentially affect you guys. And
Yes.
if you're that far along, I'm just basically saying, don't fall asleep at the schedule wheel there. Yeah.
I don't see any of these, barring anything that you guys have. These are pretty straightforward. I think it's a very complete set of plans as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So you do get, speaking to, I know it's not design review specific, but you do get to make comments on that building and the visual impact of that building under section 718. It talks about the harmony with and compatibility with the architectural character of the area. I think there's an open door there if you want to make comments about the building. It isn't a specific requirement.
Yeah.
Because there is no design review. But it's something that's in there that you get to make some comments and how you guys want this to be.
Well, you opened the door for us now, didn't you? Are you all set, or can we?
I have one more thing and that's it, and then I'm done. The landscaping costs. The code has requirements that are based on construction costs, which we don't have any information about anticipated construction costs. So we need to know that so we can confirm compliance with the code. But there are also two spots in the application that they presented a landscaping cost. One was $45,000 and some change, and then there's also a number floating around there of $19,000 and some change. We just need to resolve those two numbers and then make sure that they do meet the land development code requirements based on the construction cost of the building. And we just don't have that information yet. So with that, the staff there's some proposed stipulations in the staff report, and the staff recommends approval of the conceptual plan or the sketch plan, pending your determination regarding a couple of key sections. One is the parking waiver, one is the curb cut exception. Reviewing the landscaping, do you feel that the landscaping is sufficient with code requirements? The building itself, and then the landscaping again. Those are ones that I had kind of pushed to you, the staff pushed to you to make a determination, but otherwise, if you feel those are good, the staff recommends that this be approved and get to move on.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you very much. And I want to say that one of the best staff reports I'd seen on a building project in a long time. So thank you. I have plenty to say, but I would love to hear from the board. Proposal so far. Any more questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand properly on Zoom, but this might be silly and I just want to understand it for myself. the 5 parking spaces in the front, like how, is it just depending on what apartment you have, if you are getting one of those 5 spaces, or if you, it seems to me like most of the people who are going to be living in this apartment will be entering at the back entrance. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's how we.
And then the 5 spaces at the front and the entrance at the front, is that, what is that for? Or
It's just
Just
an
for-
alternative entrance.
Okay.
We don't expect it to be used much. Maybe pedestrians going for a walk or going to the nearby park or something like that. Quicker way to Pearl Street than going all the way around the back. If you exit on foot from the back, you got to walk all the way around 159 to get to the front. So it was easy to
Okay.
do. Front door looks good on the elevations.
Okay.
I mean, it's customary.
Yeah.
That would be a
Yeah.
building related question where we would want to see an active front. So that's great. Is there, what was the number of, or is there a number of required visitor spaces?
So in our waiver, we didn't come up with a number. We just did 1.25 spaces per unit. So.
And I'll just say the reason I'm asking is because I think if you have visitor spaces, they probably want to be up front so the visitors don't have to figure out how to, you know, unless they know where they're going already. But it relates to who is using the Pearl Street, the normal by the building entrance versus knows they have to go in the one way and down the back, and because you don't want anybody having to circulate out onto 15 again and try and, it's left turns and all this kind of thing. So in terms of your management, you may want to assign those front 5 parking spaces.
Yeah.
And you may want to consider the visitors on that or the, anybody who's a new visit. Plus you guys have, deliveries and, Ubers and drop-offs and all kinds of things that have to happen. And so because they're only 5, they're going to have a lot of pressure on them, I think. If somebody in the apartment says, bring my pizza to whatever Pearl Street, they're not going in and around the back unless they already know that. So just in terms of management, it might be something to think about. Any more, Kristen?
Oh, yeah, my other question is just the parking in general in the back. I am familiar with this building because my son likes to go to that card store, which is in the back. So I kind of know that area. And I'm wondering if the businesses, so basically anyone who is in one of those businesses, plus the people who are then going to live in the apartments, they're all going to be scrambling for one of those spaces in the back. Is that right? Or will the businesses get an assigned space? How will that work? Or will it just be free for all? Whoever gets what space gets a space.
Yeah, at this point, we're not proposing to assign spaces to either residential or commercial. We feel there's ample parking.
Okay.
Most of the uses that require most of the parking are the ones up front.
Yeah.
The ones in the back who don't have, a facade on Pearl Street, they can get as much foot traffic as the subway, for instance, in the front of the building. It's more office. There's an insurance agency back there.
Yeah, the parking in the back is very light. I mean,
Yeah.
and especially at, after 5 o'clock,
Yeah.
anybody there?
Yeah, it's going to be a building owner management issue more than anything else.
Right.
Anything else, Kristen?
That's all. Thank you.
Other board comments?
I have a question. If you're expanding the access from Pearl Street, presumably you would move some of that vegetation. Do you have a sense of where that might end up? If you're expanding it from 15 to 24 to allow for a 2-way.
Yeah, if the DRB, would like to see it in between the 2 buildings, it could go there. It could maybe get scrunched in a little bit more. There's a little bit of room on the north side of the parking lot, maybe.
It's hard to tell. I'm not sure what you're calling north and whatever, but I think north is that way, right?
No.
It's not due north there. So I guess
Let's do that.
I'm gonna still say that what you really want to try and do is provide at least some amenity space, some benches, something for the residents themselves to feel like they have a little patch of green they can, enjoy when they're not in the building. I mean, that's gonna would be nice, if you could do that. Yeah, that's all right. Anything else?
Oh, I have one other. So go ahead, Maggie.
No, I was trying to make you proud. I was gonna say something. So there would not be a little path or way to walk from the back to the front. You'd do all the way around the.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, you could go through the building. I mean, you can go through
Yeah,
the
if you're a
front of the
resident.
building.
Yeah. Well,
You can go through the front of the building to get to the back.
No, there's nothing on the side.
That was actually going to be my question. Why wouldn't you do a sidewalk that goes in between so you really around between the two buildings and connect them that way?
Screening would go away if you did that.
Yeah, so we said you'd walk through the building.
Okay, but there would be no reason why you could do a sidewalk? Because that would take out the buffering.
Yeah, there's a story grade difference too.
Oh, okay.
So, it wouldn't be too steep, but
Yeah.
Well, it might, I mean, how many people in the building are gonna have dogs and want to go out and walk them, and it's just something to think about. I think even a little winding pathway that's, semi-maintained or mostly maintained might be considered desirable, but,
okay.
They live there, they're not the same as the commercial people there.
Right.
They do things that you do on a daily basis when you live places, and sometimes that involves walking around the building for some reason.
Well, this may be more of a interior layout question, but for any of the apartments in the building, can they exit from either door, or are they gonna have an assigned, can you only access apartments 1 through 8 from the back door versus the front door?
I believe it's a single hallway.
It's a single
through the
hallway.
middle,
You can
so
exit
you
from the
go
front
out.
and back.
All right, anyone in the audience want to say something?
Go ahead.
And introduce yourself and yeah.
My name's Eric Stone. I'm representing 163 Pearl Street, which is the adjacent lot north.
Runs east-west.
West. So we are west. So we run a distribution warehouse out of the back for a small chain of women's clothing stores. And we lease the building in the front to Red Panda, which is a restaurant that opened up about 2 years ago. So we've run about 4 restaurants. We've leased about 4 different businesses out of that space. Vermont Sandwich Company, 20-something years ago. New World Tortilla. Then it was Firebird Cafe, which you guys are all aware of now. So all these businesses started off really small and grew and left us for bigger spots, bigger restaurants, for more parking. And Dan, who owns the Red Panda, is off to a great start as well. So our concern, part of the reason they're successful is because people are able to get in and out quickly to get their lunch and leave. I'm just concerned with the lack of parking. It's going back to visitor parking that you were talking about, that may happen in our lots, thus impeding our small businesses. And I don't know what assurances can be made that that won't happen, but that's a real big concern that we have. I could speak of the hedgerow on the west side. They're actually pretty full-size cedar trees. So I would hope that those wouldn't go away because it is a pretty decent buffer. But that's my concern, and I just wanted to express that to the board and go on record for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Anybody have a question for you?
Yeah, trying to clarify. Is your concern that their residents would park in your spot, or that it would be visitors?
Well, I think residents are going to know not to park there. It's visitors. So next to us is the Exchange, and we have people who come in. The Exchange lot is completely empty. They'll come in and park in our lot, walk over to the exchange and shop there. So there's complete disregard or knowledge of, they just see a big open lot. And so, if I like the idea of keeping the front 5 parking spots open for visitors, but you're going to have tenants park there just because they don't want to go around the back. And I also noticed that it's not real clear if you're visiting somebody in that apartment where the actual parking is. So are they going to know to go around the back or not? So that's my concern. I just wanted to express that.
Is there a fence or anything that kind of makes it less convenient to park in?
There's not. There's the hedgerow. In the back section, it's wide open. And I see people walking out back and tromping around the back of our warehouse. The woman who lives there now runs her dogs back there. So, and you got 18 units, it's going to be a lot more people. And I think, going back to the number of parking per apartments, you're going to have a lot of couples in there. Couples have 2 cars, 2 jobs. That's how I look at it. So, I guess, we'd like to have some assurances that people are not going to be parking in our lot and impeding Dan's business. Because he's doing mostly, since the pandemic hit, restaurants, as you know, had to change their model. It switched to mostly to go. And he's probably, I can't speak for his business, but I'm guessing he's probably 80% of his business is grab and go. So they're in and they're out.
All right, very good. I'll just give you one tidbit that we've heard over the last number of years on the apartment bedroom count issue, and that is 1-bedroom apartments are still by far the most desired number of bedrooms per unit. Just seems like a lot of people are looking for those. And
need
they
them in the county for sure.
They don't tend to be that convenient for people once they start acquiring things like partners and lots of dogs, and it's just not big enough.
Yeah.
So we, especially on the parking count, the numbers have been studied extensively, not just for shared parking opportunities, but in general, what's the right number? Because it's a big question.
Yeah.
Almost everybody says, "Oh, it's an apartment. You got to have 2 spots."
Yeah.
But the research has suggested that that's not even close to true. It is somewhere down 1.25, 1.37, somewhere in there. It's a low number. It's not 2. That said, I think the biggest advantage here that tends to make some sense about parking and number of cars is you're on one of the busiest transit lines in the whole county right there. That's certainly a factor that should be a benefit to residents. Maybe they have no cars. We won't know till we really see what happens, but the numbers have been studied extensively, and I just wanted to make you feel a little better about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for your
The
time.
rest of your concerns are
Yep.
good. Thank you. Diane.
I'm Diane Clemens, and if you're proud, I'm on the planning commission. I used to sit in that bench way back when. Numerous things. Nice plan, but it's a good thing it's sketch. So my question is, this is what I'm gonna look up here. Up here, it said if trash is going to be on one lot, I would say the trash has got to be up here. So I haven't noticed this until, because this wasn't really prevalent on the online piece here. Because I live across the street from these guys. So I look at this building and have for the last 40 years. So, my question is, the trash guys that you've already got right now have a tendency to come before dawn. So are they going to be having trash at this corner and at that corner of the lot? Okay, or is this going to be combined? Because right now, these guys don't know that what the ordinance is 7 PM. Right now, there was, at one point in time, a walkway from the front here, it might be wood, it might be whatever, but there was a cement walk that used to go down to the back parking lot. I'm not sure if that has gone away, but there was a walkway that did go down, just so that you know. Sort of thing, and people did use it 30-some years ago, I'm not sure where it is now. Okay, so that's that concern. My other concern to bring up is I don't see anything about snow removal. And for there, because remember I lived my front yard, okay, is your backyard. So there's a pile of snow in the back. If you're going to be actively using 18 spots, there is definitely going to be a requirement for snow removal. And possibly moving that snow so that people can actually be in those spaces for the snow. I'm all agreed to, sharing spaces, as a previous planning commissioner that actually had applications. It is the way to go, is repaving places. So sharing spots if that's workable, that's good. I compliment you on doing that. But I would be concerned about how many cars going out of that parking lot, Pearl Street. It took me 20 minutes to get here today, and I remember I live behind that building. Pearl Street can be challenging to make a left turn. So that's I would like to see, where that is. I know in the past, there's been van parking. There's been a tractor trailer sort of thing sitting in the lot for an extended period of time. And I recognize that it's a business concept. But if this is going to be residential, I would not like to see the access of extended tractor van parking in the back there. At one point in time, there was a motor running on one of the trailers for an extended period of time. Luckily, it was during the closed window period of life of the season, so that it was not a noise nuisance. But given that that is a wetland and that is one of the beginning places of Sunderland Brook, that wetland is an important piece for some of the wildlife that live down and use that as an access corridor. My cats have brought up frogs from down there, so I know that it is an active wetland. Just so as to, it's a ravine as opposed to, it's not flat. It's by any stretch of the imagination. It does run down a whole story down to that wetland, going straight down. So it's not flat. So amenities, I agree with you. It'd be nice to have something with maybe a bench or something, but it is an active wetland down there. But I find it an interesting piece. That place used to be a house, then it used to be a real estate agent, and then it became, I'm not sure what it is right now. I think it's a house again. So it's kind of encouraging that you guys space to go back to housing. But that's what I like to see is that snow removal and how they're going to be accessing that parking space. And yes, it is a half story to a story below, depending on where it is, below up on the bluff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't see headlights coming in from Earl Street as they're coming in access and going down. So be aware of that. but it's an interesting lot, and thank you for bringing more housing.
Thank you, Diane. The only question that brings to mind for me is potentially we'd want to increase some screening on the northeast corner of the existing lot where you're now going to have a much more active parking approach, right? So cars coming in, going down, going around the back at night because they're residents, not business people, right? So maybe one of the responses to the change in use of the parking area is to provide a little more buffering there for the neighbors across the ravine. So I would have to defer to people that know what it looks like from the other side of the ravine because I don't. But that's an interesting observation, and if we're increasing that parking or that vehicular activity a lot, then it's appropriate for us to talk about some screening.
And we're struggling to find space to put the required landscaping, so.
Oh,
That may work.
yeah. There you go. So I kind of jumped us over the building itself. Sorry. But we did. I like to get to the audience, and they've been very patient. So, how about we pull up the elevations and Jeff teed us up. We never took the shot, so let's take it now.
I don't know if I have the elevations on the website.
Oh, was it a separate? No, there.
What sheet number is it?
That's the last two, and there's no number.
No.
It's Mike Dugan's handiwork, which is usually not on a big sheet.
Okay, let me keep trying to find it, but I think everybody's here, Jeff.
Yeah, so Mike's showing the
Paper
retaining
copy.
wall, which may or may not actually be there, so that's fine. Yeah. All right, I've been doing all the talking, so you guys are all up. We'll start with Dylan. He's probably still trying to find him on it.
I'm still trying to find it.
Yeah. Anyone else ready? You guys ready? Come on.
Dylan, you want this set here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
So you've got some really skinny balconies here, just the balconies on the back here. You've got some of the double door and then some of the single.
Yeah, single door on the right side of the front facade, and double door on the left side, and then
That's the Pearl Street side you're looking at.
Got it. The front.
And I'm just curious, is the round windows, is that a stairway? Or a corridor?
Yeah, it was single hallway. I think it's there.
Or playful.
Shows the side of the building here too.
Yeah.
How do you get to the balcony on the side there? There's no door.
They come from inside and it's tucked in a little nook, so they're coming
I
in
got
from
you.
the
You come
other
in this
side.
way, turn around. I got you.
Yeah. It is tricky when you don't have a plan, though, isn't it? For me, the biggest interesting thing is that along Pearl Street, there's a pretty strong orientation for buildings to run with the street, and this one has its narrow end to the street, which is kind of refreshing for me. And the lot is long and narrow and deep, so that's kind of by necessity, but I think it also gives the building itself a chance to do something that the other ones can't do, which is present a whole different facade to the street that looks more like a residential building than a strip mall. So, I kind of like it a lot, which is, that's just me. So,
I like the round windows. They're
Yeah.
pretty unique.
What's the proposed siding?
The white squares, I believe, is a paneling type siding. More specifics, and I'm not an architect, but the and then the lower siding, I believe we have a cement board.
and the upper panels could be cement board. They do make the panels now, so that, I've seen some of those around town. Materials are appropriate. They look good. It's showing a standing seam or a metal roof on the top, and color scheme is fine. It's appropriate for the area. I like the notion that you still have a front porch, right? I mean, every nice residential building has some way to say, hey, I'm showing you residential kinds of parts and pieces, especially as they relate to entries.
I like how I set them up so none of them are really looking at a building that's next door. Back left and front right, and they don't have any balcony.
There's one question I have, and it's, again, I think it's somewhere between you on your site plan and Mike on the elevations. His elevation here to show more of a flat porch roof with maybe some, tension rods or something holding it up.
Yeah.
Canopy. And your renderings on the site plan, I know you're not really trying to show exactly what's there, but they suggest a different kind of roof,
Okay.
like standing seam metal, which is normally sloped. So,
Okay. Hatching.
yeah. So it's not a big thing, but if you're going to be consistent, the retaining wall and those types of details on the side, I think there's, a couple of things you could just fine tune there. Once you and Mike are on the same page.
I'm nearly certain I do not have these access anywhere. Kristen, are you okay? Do you have this? Okay, good.
I saw her say yes.
All right, any more questions from the board? Comments? Engineers? Staff? Audience?
I will make one comment in regard to something that Shawn said in terms of traffic and the number of cars here associated with it. They did provide traffic information. We did look at it.
Mhm.
It's a proposed 6 p.m. peak trips coming from the building. And we looked at it, and I don't feel like that's a big deal. I don't dispute that turning left can be very complicated, but I just wanted that she brought it up. We did think about it, and I don't see a need to study traffic anymore with that number of cars.
All right, so since, the staff report's written as if it's maybe not a final, but more than a conceptual or a sketch, how do we want to handle this, Regina? Do we need to make any kind of a motion that includes all the stipulations, or can we just say that in general we're fine with the conceptual as presented, and they have a record of all of our comments on, right? Because we don't really have to approve all this stuff now.
I would say the proposed stipulations that you have here in this staff report are the conditions of approval that you want to put forth.
All right. And did we come up with any more? We came up with a few more, which I think I'm going to say includes the buffering at the base of the existing drive entry that goes around the back. I'm going to say that the applicant should consider additional residential type amenities on the residential lot. specifically in the green areas around the building. And they may include a sidewalk or other path of some type if it works out.
Visitor spaces in the front.
Visitors spaces and or delivery or
15-minute
some
parking,
kind
whatever.
of management notion for what's happening for the high demand 5 spaces in front. I don't have a problem with the spaces in the way they're shown. Like I wouldn't want to see us go down to 4 just because we have a little bit of an overlap between the side setback and what we're showing. I think we talked about, well, I don't know if we have to say anything. If there's, I think it's probably already in Jeff's notes. If there's a wider entry to have a two-way access, or if there's two-way access to the front, it's going to be wider. I think because we're talking about shared parking and increased pressure on the existing parking spaces, that snow storage should be addressed because, we know that if you end up piling it all up on your existing spaces, you'll lose spaces. So that should be addressed. And the notion that if there's an issue with parking management and it begins to affect the neighbors, I'm sure the applicant will be the first to hear about it because somebody will come knocking on your door. But any evidence to suggest that you're aware of the potential and have thought of ways to mitigate that might be helpful in a parking management approach. So I'm thinking that we want to see some kind of parking management written narrative that goes along with this notion that we're going to share parking and that we've got to have a parking agreement in place.
Just one note, John, I don't think you have the authority to say that that 5th parking space can be in the setback. I know it seems frustrating, but I don't think there's any waiver from that setback requirement.
Thought that it was, but I don't know either.
All right,
find out.
you guys can confer on that and we'll respond accordingly. But it seems, I mean, we're not formally blending the 2 lots into 1 lot, so there's still a setback required from that line, right? And
Right.
even if we have some parking agreement, it doesn't make the line go away until they merge the lot. I've suffered through this before. I get it, but if you can, staff can look into that, then we can answer.
And we don't intend on merging lots in the future.
Any other board stipulations to be recorded at this point? Kristen, anything?
It's probably a silly question. I think we went over it. Can you go from the idea is that you can go from the 159 lot into the 161 lot, right?
Appears to be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
If that's the case, if you are gonna enable that, the 20 needs to go up to 24 as well, between there. We didn't make a bunch of comments because I wasn't sure what your intention was.
Now, can we waive that if we feel like?
I think you could.
Yeah. I mean, for 5 spaces,
It-
might be
I don't
4.
believe it'll take a space. What I was talking about is that right there,
Yeah.
and I don't think it'll take a space because
Well, no, but you got to pull it out of somewhere. So I'm trying to figure out where the 20. I'm trying to figure out how. I mean, if you've got room to do it, and you're not using that fin as a, if that's longer than a parking space, then you can do it. But if it's,
yeah.
I wouldn't
believe
want
that
to.
you
I wouldn't want to reduce the buffer to pearl in order to pull that off. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I believe that the planning commission has waived that before, entrances to underground parking. I've seen those get narrowed up, in the past.
And the sidewalk along Pearl is unaffected because it's outside of that tree buffer. Yeah. All right. Anything else? I guess I need a motion that says do we accept or do we approve at this point?
You approve it.
We approve it. All right, so, anyone want?
Motion to approve the staff recommendations with the proposed stipulations.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Oh, there was another comment coming.
Is
There wasn't.
No, I don't think so.
So aye.
You're aye?
So-
Okay. Any opposed?
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, I think the motion has to be that you're approving the conceptual plan, but I see that staff recommends that you approve the conceptual plan, so you already had it covered.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. All right, you folks are on your way.
Thank you.
Nice job. Brilliant conceptual plan level work.
Now we got a lot of direction.
But you're there. I mean, you're pretty much there, so that's good. All right, let's see, it's getting late, isn't it? Other development board review board items. Are there any?
Thank you.
All right.
No.
The only one I can think of is we need a deliberative session on the previous public hearing. So we need to either schedule that and I think obviously within 45 days.
January, probably at this point.
Yeah, so if maybe our first meeting in January, would that be would be fine, or does that get us too close to 45 days?
I'm trying to count real quick. 21, 28. We got a little bit close, so, but I think we could do it that night, the night of the 19th.
Rather than have a special meeting or something. So you staff are gonna look at, maybe get a legal opinion. 'Cause I think for me, it's a fascinating question, and it's not whether I like it or don't like it. It's more of a legal technicality, and I'm, want to make sure that we're not overstepping.
Yeah, I mean, you could start a deliberative session right now, and then we could,
Postpone it, table it, or postpone it until,
yeah.
all right. Anybody else feel like trying a couple of minutes 5 minutes of a deliberative session just to talk about where we think we are?
Sure.
Okay. I'll say 5 minutes.
Okay.
We'll start.
We need a motion to go into deliberative session.
All right. I move we go into deliberative session to review discuss the cannabis
I'll second it.
topic.
Sorry, I'll be faster.
Right, we're in.
Recording stopped.
A second.
Oh, you stopped recording. So Scott, do you keep recording or not?
Nope.
Well, sounds like you did. All right. So we're back from our deliberative session, which has been continued to a future date of January 19th or earlier. So now the only thing left for us to do is adjourn unless somebody has any last comments, announcements. All right. So we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
We need a second. Good. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you.